And even if you could check it, it would be useless, because the question you want to ask is, Mr. Mrs. Refugee, will the children you have in your new country, will they acculturate successfully to that place, or will they be alienated from it in the way that so many young French, Belgians, British, and Germans are, and will they turn to violence, whether it's terrorism or just ordinary delinquency? Will they attack gays? Will they attack women? Will they attack religious minorities? How do we screen for that? That can't be done. But it is predictable that that is going to happen, and that is the challenge we face. On these questions about climate, again, rich, dense subject. But the thing to say, and I forget now which, I apologize, I forget now whether it was the first or the second questioner who raised this point, and Elizabeth May is right about this. It is important when you are thinking about how to respond to Syria to understand, just as that it's not the first. The Algerian Civil War of the 1990s was the first, but this is the next, and the one after that will be bigger, of an increasing tidal wave of chaos from the two parts of the world that are not bringing their populations into balance, the Middle East, North Africa region, and the Sub-Saharan Africa region. As we are going, Nigeria is going to overtake the United States in population within the lifetime of the children of people in this room. And that economy is failing, and there's going to be a mass migration out of Nigeria. We are going to see mass migrations from Yemen as that civil war intensifies. It's just because it's so poor that people can't scrape together the resources to pay the human smugglers that we don't have millions of Yemeni refugees, but we will. How is Saudi Arabia going to end up? How is Egypt, as it crosses 100 million people with not enough water and not enough food? Egypt, which at the end of World War II was a major exporter of cotton and today is the largest importer of wheat in the world, and which is seeing a crashing standard of living. As I mentioned, Syria in 1960, higher standard of living than South Korea today, 140th South Korea. That is the question you are going to have to come up with a policy response to, and it cannot be driven by impulses, emotions, and photographs, however sad.
The floor is yours, sir.
Yes, the question of the economic effect of immigration is an extremely complicated one, and one in which generalizations are dangerous. Here's a way I think about it, and why you get one kind of result when you look at the Vietnamese boat people, when you look at the refugees from Lebanon in the 1970s, when you look at other such populations. Since World War II, what we, for lack of a better term, called the Third World, has been swept by a series of revolutions that overturned old imperial structures. When those countries were ruled by empires, European empires, other empires, there arose, under the protection of those empires, what the sociologist Amy Chua calls market-dominant minorities that were typically not part of the majority, like the Chinese in Indonesia. That was Amy Chua's background, and these people would occupy crucial places in the local economy, Lebanese in East Africa. When these countries would go through their popular revolutions, the first step was to drive the market-dominant minorities out. Jews, of course, are the most complete example of a market-dominant minority. Unsurprisingly, when these groups arrive in the West or in more developed countries, they succeed brilliantly. That it is dangerous to generalize from their success to how other people from that society, the non-market populations in what are rural and peasant societies, how they're going to perform when they arrive in the West. You cannot look at what happens when the Lebanese merchants arrive and generalize that to the whole Syrian population, unfortunately. If it were true, then Syria would not have been such a mess before the Civil War. One of the questions we need to ask is if these populations are so economically ready, why were their countries so economically unsuccessful beforehand? So I think I did a lot of work on this for an article I wrote about the Atlantic. The data is there, but what is fair to say is Middle Eastern and North African immigrants to Europe have just about everywhere where there's been a calculation have been a net fiscal drain. They cost more in benefits than they contribute in taxes. And now those are very generous states, and these are people who don't earn a lot. Economically, what I worry about is less the fiscal effect than the economic effect. What do they contribute to the overall wealth of the society? And the verdict there is very damaging. All through Europe, we see Middle Eastern and North African populations participate in the labor force at levels dramatically lower than non-Middle East, non-North African populations, both native-born and immigrants from other regions. And we're going to have that same problem, I think, in North America with large-scale mass migration from the Middle East. Intervention in Syria. I was not in favor of it. I think I was in favor of the war in Iraq, but when you intervene, you have to have something you are for as well as what you are against. There was no one in Syria who we were in favor of. So all we would do is end up in the role of umpires being shot at by all sides. I didn't see the possibility of a successful intervention in the Syrian war. It would have ended up like Libya, which is you smash up what passes for order in the place, and you have nothing to offer in a replacement. I may say one last thing, because I think that third question, which I don't want to neglect, because I think it was very much directed at me.
Well, you'll have your 5 minutes.
What?
You'll have your 5 minutes.
Well, all right. But I think people want to hear the answer to that one. I think right. I won't take long.
All right.
I said at the very beginning of the debate that there was the question of why, despite the incredible population growth of the Middle East, its economy had not kept up, unlike China, unlike India, unlike other parts of the world. And I said that was a complicated question. I wasn't going to deal with it, and I don't think I can do justice to it. But one of the things we can point to is, in the entire Arabic world, population of 250 million people, there are fewer books every year translated from other languages into Arabic than are translated into Greek, a language spoken by 14 million people. And one of the things that has been a problem in that part of the world is a determination to believe that all problems are caused by outsiders, Jews, Americans, the British, somebody else. Never, the look is never inward, it is always outward. And that breeds both a culture of conspiracy thinking, and it also breeds a culture of passivity. And that is the reason why this is a region that has not only been so plunged into violence itself, but an exporter of violence to so many other people who would rather not be touched by it. The war in Iraq, whether you like it or not like it, was not some whim of the United States. It was a response. Right, wrong, smart, stupid. It was a response to the Middle East export of violence to the rest of the planet over the past third of a century. Actually now longer than that. And I think there needs to be, along with your accusations, some self-examination of what went wrong, and that in that part of the world. And that is maybe the most fundamental question of all when we are confronted by this now mass migration from that part of the world to the West.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Frum, the floor is yours, sir. 5 minutes remarks.
I have some very disillusioning news for Elizabeth May. The President Deputy Minister of Veterans Affairs was served in 2004 or 5 as the Deputy Commander of the multinational force in Iraq. When I visited Iraq a couple times and met dozens of Canadians. They were not serving in combat roles, but they were training Iraqi forces in positions often of great danger, and they served with great distinction. Canada was in Iraq. And it served bravely and well, and I think that is something that is to Canada's credit, and you may not think so, but it certainly did happen. It was a fact. So Canada was not a fighting partner in Iraq, but it was a partner. I think I do believe that despite, we've had some brushes and some exchanges back and forth, I do believe that we did actually see tonight more consensus and agreement than disagreement. I think we saw a consensus that we're not going to bring very large numbers of Syrians to Canada. Elizabeth May likes the number 35,000. And that, to my mind, that may be somewhat on the high side, but spread over in sufficient period of time and with sufficient background checking. And if you're looking for the right people, and particularly if you're emphasizing people from communities that are in most danger and are most likely to acculturate successfully to Canada, especially Yazidis and Christians, I think that it's certainly not outside the realm of the conceivable, but it's nobody's idea of mass resettlement. Mass resettlement, when you're dealing with a population of 12 million people, is denominated in the millions. Like what Germany has done by taking in 1.3 million people, about half of them probably from Syria, half of them showing up with other documents. That is what mass resettlement looks like. And what you're seeing in Germany is the consequence of mass resettlement. What France experienced with the people who left after the Algerian Civil War, they took in some hundreds of thousands of people. That is what mass resettlement looks like, and it has consequences. That is what I think we both Elizabeth May tacitly and me explicitly, I think we both agree. That's not a good idea. And Elizabeth may want to have some more complimentary statements about the reasons for her position, but the position isn't that different. The solution to the problem of this mass refugee crisis and the one that's coming next and the one that's coming after that must be found in the region. And it is a solution that is based on development. It is a solution that is based on bringing population and economic growth more closely into line. It is a solution that is based on modernizing the culture of the people in the region, in the place where they live. But it is not a solution that is based on the idea that we all agree, it seems to me, is impossible. Mass resettlement of large numbers of displaced Syrians in Canada, the Western world. You don't want it. You're not a proponent of it. I don't think it's a good idea. And I think by the time we're done, probably everybody in the House will agree with the two of us that this should not be done. But that is not a no. That is a yes. That is a yes to responsible solutions. That is a yes to electricity. That's a yes to water treatment. That's a yes to education. That's a yes to job training. That is a yes to spending 1/12 the price per person to find a solution to the refugee crisis in the place where, of course, the refugees are going to have to stay. And I thank you very much.